Breathe, sit like a mountain, breathe in its silence, solid in freedom, breathe, rest your attention,
And
light as a butterfly,
and
rest
yeah, I'm just
on
looking at
the
everybody. I'm just flipping through the screen, and I'm really kind of just acknowledging the connections that I have with actually quite a lot of people, actually. Yeah, so I'm just looking at you right now, taking you in, taking you in. Okay, so the title for this is Finding Your Compassionate Voice. Finding Your Compassionate Voice. And I didn't know what I was going to be saying until this morning, and even then I wasn't quite sure. And I kind of been tweaking just during the break because it feels like I'm sort of going somewhere, but I don't really quite know where it is yet, and I'm still trying to put the words together in my mind. And it's been very useful just having just that little breakout space after Dawa, just to again just sort of get my brain into a particular place. I'm in a bit of pain at the moment, and so you should know that. So hopefully it doesn't distract too much. So yeah, the question I've been asking myself really over the last few years is, how do I, Eugene Ellis, meet racial harm when it arises? I spend a lot of time trying to avoid a racial harm, as we all have, and but it sort of feels more and more pressing, and it's harder. It seems harder to avoid right now, that's for sure. And if compassion is an important part of that meeting, what are the limits of my compassion? So I sort of see myself as a compassionate person, and people would reflect that back to me as well. So, but then as I started to reflect on compassion, and as I started to read the book, I started to write the book, and obviously Barton, more stuff. There were some serious limits to my compassion. It was just becoming aware of it, really, and I wasn't quite the person that I thought I was. That was the, the general thing. So I need concepts. I need maps. My brain needs it to kind of hold where I'm going. I don't really hold these ideas very. I don't hold on to them. I sort of hold them quite lightly, and I sort of see them as a like a raft, like a life raft on a sort of sea bobbling about, and I'll jettison them when they've sort of served their purpose. But they are useful, and yeah. So just to say that about that. As William said, yeah, I'm part of Barton, but I'm also a therapist, and the process of dialoguing with training institutions and thinking about psychological theories. One of the things that is really prevalent, I guess, is that there's loads of theories about the human condition and who we are and how we relate to one another. But as you sort of go through all of them, and there's quite a lot, the color is not in there. We are not in those theories, or it's either been edited out or it just hasn't really even been thought about. And I thought I wanted to do the same with mindfulness, just the act of mindfulness. So at the moment, the mindfulness industry kind of has a particular way of seeing mindfulness and how it plays itself out, and it has huge, great big structures about what's going to happen, what what am I going to expect, and that map kind of creates a sense of safety, I guess, as you sort of go through the process. So I'm kind of on a journey of putting the color into mindfulness, the experience. I'm part of the Triratna Buddhist community. So I haven't really called myself a Buddhist. I think someone said, "Oh, I'm Buddhish." I feel like I'm Buddhish a little bit. So, but even then, I've asked for ordination. So, but I still don't feel like I'm quite there yet. And being a Buddhist, and I think part of it is the Sri Ratna community itself being a sort of predominantly white organization, and there's a tension there. There's some goodies there I want, and at the same time, my compassion gets compromised as I interface with the community. So yeah, so the title, what finding your voice, finding your compassionate voice. So I just thought I'd just name what I think finding your voice is about, and then say a bit about compassion, and then just I'm not sure. I'll probably generate more questions than answers right now. So I'm just going to meander, and hopefully I'll make sense when I get to the other end. So finding your voice, for me, it's a sort of process of staying with racial distress and suffering. So it's that process. So it's your own suffering, the suffering of others, and the suffering of your enemy, whoever that might look like. And finding your voice, I'm using that in terms of racial distress. Of course, you can find your voice in all kinds of oppressions as well. So, and this is it's a map, I guess, for that process. And also moving beyond the silence of racial conditioning that racial conditioning demands of us. Most people would see that as kind of having a conversation, a challenge, that kind of thing, sort of being very direct. But it doesn't have to be like that. I think there's many ways of not being, not being silent, through art, through writing, through doing a journal. The first thing is not being silent to yourself, obviously, and so that's quite a big step, to be fair. And then there's a bigger, perhaps it seems like a bigger step, but I'm not sure if it is. Perhaps a smaller step of then extending that out to other people. And then I like to deconstruct. So this idea of compassion, what does that mean exactly? And as I was reading about it, so there's empathy and there's compassion, and I kind of, well, I need to sort them out. What are we talking about here? And so empathy, again, these are just ideas, I suppose, but empathy is feeling alongside another person. So picking up on how other people are feeling, and then kind of being in resonance with them. A really important skill. If you're a therapist, you need to kind of do that at some level. And certainly in the therapy world, empathy is kind of talked about quite a lot. Compassion, not so much. But empathy, I think, has a sort of limit, i.e., you can move into empathic distress. So there's a blurring of the lines between what you're feeling, so what the other person's feeling and what you're feeling, and then it just becomes one big blurb. If you know of compassion fatigue, there's a word called compassion fatigue. I'm not sure if it's compassion fatigue. It's probably empathy fatigue. It's probably how I would see it, rather than compassion fatigue. So compassion is a very different thing. And from what I understand of neuroscience, and that, when you someone's imaging the brain and someone's going through some empathic distress, the same pathways light up as the pain pathways. So empathic distress and pain kind of go together. They light up the same areas. But actually, when someone's experiencing compassion, or they're in a compassionate state, there are different brain structures actually lighting up, not pain structures. So there's a different neurological experience that people have. And compassion is a feeling for, and not necessarily a feeling with, a feeling for. And it's a simple acknowledging and witnessing without reacting. And if you get more neurological about it, the race conversation tends to activate us, even if we're just having it with ourselves. And so compassion kind of almost beyond that. It's actually witnessing without the triggers, without the triggering. And compassionate mental states are incompatible with, with defense, with being triggered, and sort of that kind of active or passive defenses that we get into. Okay, so I was thinking, okay, well, have I actually experienced that before? Compassion? Have I actually? I mean, I do. I mean, I guess I'm talking specifically really around race distress. Because I think if we take that out of the picture, of course, yes, we all can be compassionate and generate those things within us, with our families and our friends and even strangers. And then you start to sort of shift into the area of race, and all those things start to break down. So coming back to how do I meet racial harm? There are sort of two questions that come to mind. How do I fight for racial justice without harming myself or harming other people? And is it even possible? And how do I respond to situations, people, and institutions that I can't control? I don't have control over the other. I don't have control over institutional racism. Those are the things I will meet as I go deeper and deeper into staying with race, I guess. I read a fantastic book, The Mindful of Race, Ruth King. I'm sure some of you have kind of had a look at it. Yeah, really important book to go through. So she says, well, she's found this quote. She doesn't know who it's attributed to, but she said it doesn't really matter anyway. I'll just say it because it seems important. So she says, it's not our work to force someone's growth to our liking. It is the work of love to admire the beauty before you, to give people a sense of safety to unfold, to keep each other company when drowning in anguish, until the waves can balance out and our feelings can once again live within us. Yeah, it's a really nice, well, yeah, it kind of says what needs to be said there. So it is not our work to force someone else's growth to our liking. It is the work of love to admire the beauty before you, to give people a sense of safety to unfold, to keep each other company when drowning in anguish, until the waves can balance out and our feelings can once again live within us. So there's this idea, there's this kind of whoosh, wave of stuff going on, and just sort of being with kind of just allows a sort of settling of that. And yeah, well, of course, her answer to this, how do you respond to race distress and race suffering, is compassion, of course. But how compassionate am I really? So although I hadn't really thought about it at the time, but the process of writing the book, and also the experiences that we all had over the last year, have kind of been an exploration of the limits of my compassion. And I hadn't really thought about things in that way until I've been doing this for years and years and years. I haven't really thought about it in that way until just this morning. But it sort of feels important to, for me anyway, to think about it in that way. So the process of writing the book, I mean, so the book is called The Race Conversation. And it's a map, I suppose, of the places that people can go when they're exploring race. It goes here, it goes there. You can have these feelings and that feeling and this feeling. And then this idea of mindfulness being a kind of a way to meet the distress, and also compassion as a way, as a sort of soothing balm over the distress. And so that's the sort of the idea of the overall idea. And yeah, so creating a map of a person of color's journey through mindfulness. You know, I just thought that was quite a sort of important thing to do. And I don't claim to have it, but I guess it's just beginning that exploration. But while I was writing the book, there was a chapter called Witnessing the Wound, which is a précis of the vast amount of history, which we could spend many years going through, of slavery, colonization, indentured labor, into what's called post racism, and from old time racism to modern racism. So that kind of whole journey. And I read a lot, and much of which is not in the book because it just didn't feel like it was just too much. But it was really it's really painful. And one part of my head was, oh, okay, there's an interesting fact. I'll pop it over here onto this sheet here because of interesting facts. So there was that part of my brain operating, and then there was another part completely that I was unaware of, that was just yeah, being traumatized, I guess, or re-traumatized. And so I found myself having to meditate. I had to sort of put my meditation on steroids. I had to sort of really pump it up. And so I'd write something, I would do a bit of research and write something and just not be satisfied with it. It's just not right somehow. So I'd sort of do a meditation and then have these quite intense body responses, and sometimes shaking, actually a lot of shaking. And I just sort of let it be, had a lot of aversion, reflecting on what I'd written and what I'd read, reflection to aversion to whiteness, white men being the main architects of the race construct, and really getting into touch with I guess stuff I knew was there, but I hadn't really wanted to make contact with. And then that would translate into the outside world. Yeah, so I'd meet people, and it was easier to stay in my house in COVID. Obviously, I didn't need to go out. But I could just feel myself withdrawing from the world at large and moving into, you know, hunkering down in people of color spaces. And then also, you know, whilst meditating, listening to the stories I told myself, about myself and about whiteness, and trying to kind of make connections with my conditioning and where those stories came from. And also, at the time I was doing this Buddhist study, so I was getting quite a lot of input about, you know, the bigger picture of suffering, holding in mind that grasping onto the illusion of a separate self was it in itself a cause of suffering. So there's a lot of stuff was going on there, and I sort of came up to the boundary of my compassion, and I just couldn't. I still can't. You know, can I find a way through? And I think I've gone some way. I think I've gone some way in that. I also became fascinated with Donald Trump. Oh, how long do I have left? Not that long. Especially the transition of power to Joe Biden, and became literally, I woke up and I was on YouTube watching the videos and seeing that whole thing play out, and sort of bring in that sense of compassion, or, you know, just feeling the intensity of the way that some news anchor person might express themselves, and then another person expressing themselves and feeling not feeling that, feeling very different, and just sort of sitting with all of that. And then I sort of and then there was this idea of this, you know, what was different about what they were saying. There's this idea of which I've actually put in the book, which I sort of thought, well, there's this idea of non-relational being, So one side of, it's like one side of a relationship not acknowledging that they are part, that they have a part to play in any distress that another person might be feeling. Can you see it in couples all the time, in it, you know, where they're fighting and no one, one person says, you're crazy. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just you. So that non-relational being was really evident. And then I start to think, well, where does it play out? And it wasn't just in white bodies; it was in black bodies too. And then the way I would see that is sort of, some people might call it, reality distortion. This idea of distorting reality. And a word we could use for with regards to racial distress and suffering is a sort of state of whiteness, a sort of state of whiteness. And noticing that there was this state of whiteness in me too, that I would also defend whiteness at times, and just realizing that, just noting it. It was uncomfortable, but there it is. That was the reality of my conditioning. And the idea of relational beings as opposed to non-relational being. Again, where does that reside? And again, just seeing where people are willing to accept that they are part of the system of distress, and seeing where that's located. And again, it wasn't located on any particular side. Obviously, it was predominantly one side and the other. And then just sort of separating out all of that, I think, was really important to me. And the more I stayed with race suffering and the reality of the limits of my compassion, actually, the more secure I felt, actually, and all the more grounded, the more secure I felt on the ground that I was walking on. So, so I think one of the fears is that my own reality distortion will bring me into situations where I'm suddenly woken up in this situation with a conversation, and how painful that is when you're brought face to face with your own conditioning when you're relating to another person. And coming back to Ruth's book, she talks about fighting with firm love, which I quite like. I think someone's got the book there and they're holding it up. Thank you, Elizabeth. And forcing, and this, which sort of sounds a bit pie in the sky in some ways, you know what I mean? You think of that, it's like, well, it doesn't sound very powerful to me. But I mean, I guess what she's saying is that this kind of love, I guess, this wise love, doesn't always end up in the outcome that you want, but it doesn't work against it. So it's so you don't always get what you want, but you're not actually working against it. So, and forcing people to change is counterproductive to change itself. So there is a line. There is a sort of holding the boundary, and also doing that with compassion. So, and a big question for me in all of this was, what's in it for? I can see what's in it for people of color to transcend and to heal, but what's in it for white people? What's in it for them? Well, beyond being a good person or wanting to be helpful to this process. And so someone put me onto, I mean, I've read a bit of James Baldwin, but not this particular part. Someone put me onto some of his writings where he talks about this idea that it's not a privilege to have a social status that enables denial of reality. So there's kind of like, well, it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a good place to be in this privileged position. But is it beneficial to be disconnected from reality? So that kind of unlocked something for me about, okay, well, if I'm having a race conversation, I'm not just doing it for me. I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for the world, and I'm actually seeing that particular state of mind that I'm talking about in this racial context as a state of mind that's a sort of general state of mind that that's bringing us here to this with the extinction of species, and the using up of resources, the land in particular ways that are unsustainable. Again, it's that same kind of non-relational kind of idea and mental state. So I just maybe want to say, just want to read, just to conclude, something from the end of the book, and that sort of relates to all of this. So one of the things which has been helpful for me is actually connecting oppressions and being allies to other oppressions as much as I can. And it's strange, this deep dive into race and race oppression has actually kind of made me more concerned with other oppressions in some way. So it sort of has a sort of strange impact. So instead of me drowning in it, it's actually broadened my perspective. So I've written here, although we are predominantly being focusing on race, it is also vital that we connect racial oppression with other oppressions. Racial oppression is part of the bigger picture of harm that humans inflict on each other and the planet. For instance, the assault on the planet's biodiversity and the rapid acceleration of species extinction. All of these harms are driven by the psychological drivers of wealth accumulation to quench the fear-driven need for material comfort and security, and also an unwillingness to stay with discomfort of seeing ourselves as we truly are. It might at first appear that developing awareness of ourselves as we are, our greeds, our hatreds, our delusions, might make us unhappy. Also, that the work of awareness is yet another demand on our time and energy. This is, however, something deeply satiating about aligning our outer behaviors with our inner human values of liberty and individual freedom that make the journey worthwhile. So for me, this is a kind of a beginning of what it's like. I guess I have a particular racialized experience, and I'm sure there'll be other experiences which I don't capture. But for myself, I'm articulating a journey through this sort of mindfulness process, and bringing the focus on people of color's experience in that, and what emerges. So I think I'll leave it there. When we get into groups, I think it might be worth reflecting on your own compassion, the limit of your own compassion, and anything else that really has kind of been sparked by what I've said. Hopefully it sort of hasn't been too disjointed, and it kind of makes some kind of sense. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Can we all unmute? Shall we unmute and show our appreciation for Eugene's offering?
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was really, personally, I found it really helpful, just the way you framed so many things. So when you said initially, how do I fight racial justice without causing harm to myself or others? That's just like, I was like, oh yes, that is it. That is the key of what I want to create. And when you were speaking about love not forcing an outcome, but and it will be moving in the right direction, but sometimes not what we want to see, what we want, but trusting, this is my interpretation of what you said, but trusting that love is flowing through us and it will find its way. So thank you so much. I took so much from your presentation. I'm really interested in your book. Thank you for sharing that with us. So yeah, we're going into breakout rooms now, and I just want to drop in that we are nearing the end of our retreat. So I just want to kind of like sound that note that we're in this final phase. So soon we will be letting each other go for now. Only for now, though. So you may want to include that in your heart and in your being as you're sharing with people here in this space. So just the invitation, as Eugene said, to reflect on compassion and anything Eugene has shared. And also, just to include how you're feeling about leaving and any other reflections that might be there. So I'll do the same as before in our breakout rooms. I will just leave you now to have unstructured time and just go around and share with each other. And then we'll come back in the main space again. Give me a wave.